welcome to Art with Ian. Today we're going to be talking about 3 composition tips that you can use to start improving your art. Let's get into it. Alright, so we're going to talk about 3 tips for better composition. So I've got this piece that I put together, and it's basically just using the 3, trying to exploit the 3 tips that I'm going to be talking about. So as you can see, we've got a background that's light, we've got a middle ground that's in the midtones, and we've got a foreground that's in the darks. So if I turn off this layer, this is basically what I started with. And I'm just going to kind of show you the build-up as it goes. So you've got the background and a little bit more background layering. You see the lightest value is on the back. Then the value gets a little bit darker. Then you have another layer, gets a little bit darker. Now we're getting close to getting into the 50%. See, as we reach the middle of the canvas, we're getting close to a 50% gray. So if I were to use the color picker and click on that and go check, you can see it's just south of 50% gray at the middle of the canvas. Then I've got a bit of fog that I put in and some sky, and this helps. This is kind of like that atmosphere, bringing atmosphere in to help kind of push that distance a little bit, push things back into the distance. A little bit of water reflection, just a tiny bit, and then I put another layer of middle ground rocks, basically just to break this up and help further sell that distance. Then you get into the foreground, so now you see the value deepening. Now we're getting closer to more like a 70 or 80% gray. So if I take a color pick of this and we come and look, yeah, we're down here at like 80% gray. And next I come in with a little bit more interest to break this space up. That's more like a 90% gray. And then the actual focal point coming across, and you'll see that this having this nice dark value over the top of my brightest area of the canvas creates high contrast, and areas of interest need to be high contrast if you want people to recognize immediately that that's where they should be looking. So if that's not what you're going for, if you're going for a very subtle kind of composition, then obviously there are different ways to accomplish that. But if you want something where the eye immediately goes to what you want the viewer to look at, high contrast. The highest area of contrast is the first thing you see. And then just a little bit more interest to break up this space here in the foreground, another fallen tree, kind of make it feel like there's not just this one random tree that fell over, like maybe there was an event, like a storm or something came through here and more than one tree went down. And so now we're basically back, and a few birds, just something to help break, something to pull some of this darker value up into the canvas, just a tiny bit of balance. And so yeah, basically now we're back to this. I did add a little bit of bloom to just kind of help really sell that light is striking right here along the silhouette of the panther. So we're basically back to our full painting. So if we were to look now at a value scale from 0 to 100, in between you've got 10, 20, 30, and this here is this area right here this is basically the 3 values plus white that you should be using in the back of your painting. So you'll see this is kind of broken up into thirds. This sky, and the very farthest back area is this nice light. It's using the 10, 20, and 30% grays. And then the middle of your piece, you're going to want to use up to 60. And this is obviously somewhat loose. It's not like, oh, it's above 60, it's 63%. I can't use it in the middle. Like, clearly it's not that finite, but this is just a general rule of how to break things up. And then you go to these three, 70, 80, and 90 for your foreground. If you break your piece up into these kind of three clear categories, you're always going to be visually clear. Like the viewer's always going to understand what they see. They're going to understand that this is close to me, this area here is kind of farther away, and then this area in the back goes as far as you can see, think, whatever. It goes into space, basically, just the sky. So basically, what you're that's basically how you use value to create a very clear visual image for your viewer. Now, so that's one rule, or it's not a rule, that's one tip. I don't really like the idea of rules. There aren't any rules. These are just tips. Like you can, any one of these things that I'm talking about can be broken and a great composition can be made. These are just tips. So another great tip for composition, let's get rid of these so we can see what we're doing here, is breaking the canvas up into thirds. So break it up into thirds vertically, break it up into thirds horizontally. Where these thirds intersect, these intersections, these are really good areas for putting your focal point. So a focal point that's off down here in this bottom right corner, for example, it's like, why would I want the viewer to look almost off the canvas before they see something, the interesting point of the piece? It's too far away. However, and same with the top left or over here, any of these outside rectangles, they're too far away from the center to be a good focal point, because now your viewer's leaving, they're already in the process of leaving the canvas before they see what the interesting thing to see. However, if you go too far into the center, it's got a really like a forced look to it, like very contrived, like right in the center, you know? You don't really want that either. So if you pick one of these intersecting points, you're kind of close enough to the center that the viewer's not leaving the canvas, but you're far enough away from it that you don't look like you've basically smacked something interesting right in the middle, you know, the most obvious thing to do. So the intersections are great, and obviously it's pretty loose, like it could be in and around. It doesn't have to be right smack on it, but you know, somewhere in that general area. And so for the last tip, so that was tip number 2. For the last tip, use a balance of interest and rest. So busier areas need to be balanced out by areas where there's a lot of rest. For example, you look at this sky, almost nothing is happening. It's really comfortable. You don't have to think, you just look and it's just there. But this area where the focal point is, I've got all these branches and there's all these lines, and then you get down here and it's kind of another area of rest with just a little bit more interest than the sky. But trying to create a balance of interest and rest, so complex areas and areas that rest, and also making sure that you keep a balance between your values. So like too much dark without enough light to balance it can look heavy, like your piece will look weighted heavily in one direction. And if you're going for that, I mean on purpose, that can be a thing you do on purpose, but be aware that the weight of value is happening for the viewer. And so if you don't want your piece to feel too lopsided, you have to kind of think about the weight of your values. Like for example, this river here is bringing just that little bit of extra light to kind of pull the weight of the sky down into the lower part of the canvas so it doesn't feel too imbalanced. So let's just cover what we've gone over here. So 1, create clear and interesting shapes using light, medium, and dark values to break the composition into 3 parts: the background, midground, and foreground. 2, divide your composition into thirds and place your focal point on one of the 4 intersections. And lastly, Use areas of rest and interest to ensure the viewer has a balanced viewing experience. And I'll just add slightly to that also that the values that you choose also add to that balance. How much dark, how much light, and all of that. So anyways, I hope you got something out of this video. I hope these 3 tips will help you see improvements in your own compositions, and I will see you guys in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and share it with your friends. Make sure you ring that bell for notifications of future videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.